Okay, so I've really been wanting to do this video for a while now. The past 2 or 3 weeks or so, I've kind of been doing a deep dive into tumbling, and specifically for vault, but just a deep dive into tumbling and things like turnover and creating rotation and big, powerful skills. So this is kind of the culmination of everything that I put together. I'm going to go over what I consider the gold standard of tumbling, like the basic foundation that everyone should have. And then I'm going to kind of transition into how those things apply to elite tumbling and what we're actually seeing when we see these things in fast motion. So to start out, I'm going to use Jake Jarman, fantastic tumbler. There aren't many people who can do every type of tumbling, like triple twist, 3.5 twist, and double layout, triple twisting, double layout, those kind of things. So he's got full mastery of double flipping and twisting, which says something about his technique. This pass here is triple double laid out, and we can play that through and see how he's creating this rotation. Boom, boom, boom. It's huge. Like, he bones the stick easy, spots it all day, done. I'll go slow through his round off back handspring so we can see that. There we go. So that's all I want to play for now. I'm going to go into an explanation of it, and I'm going to try to keep as much of my own personal coaching philosophy out of this as possible and just like strictly do physics and biomechanics, and then kind of let you guys figure the rest of that part out on your own. So golden standard, or what I would consider golden standard. This is the floor here. I'm going to use red to kind of signify the path that we're doing. Everything in physics is equal. So the gold standard is the most efficient possible motion, which would be equal in and equal out. So if there's an imbalance to those two things, if you're putting in more than you're getting out, that means you're not efficient, you're not using your strength or your rotation correctly. And also on the other side, if you're putting in a little and getting a lot out, that's also a bad thing. Sounds great, but then we have to think about, like, how are you doing that? Because physics, as we know, doesn't allow that. So in a situation where a little goes in and a lot comes out, we're probably compensating somewhere. So gold standard here, we're going to do round off. Sorry. I'm going to try to make these circles as nice as possible. Round off, backhand spring, and then whatever kind of flip you want. Bear with me for a second. So this is equal distance. This is where I would start with, again, not personal philosophy, just biomechanics. This is where a beginner should start. And I'll explain why once I get through this process. So your round off here, you're going to start here. I'm going to use triangles for the body. Head would go this way. In the center of any shape change, there should be a straight position. So that's what we're going to denote there. It should go straight through the middle at each one of these humps, with the last one being as close as possible in terms of efficiency. So that's upside down on the round off. We'd land somewhere here, and then this would be the middle, and then this would be the entry to the back handspring. Head goes down here, upside down. Hands would contact there, leave somewhere there, and then contact again. Let me get rid of that one so we don't botch the set. Somewhere in there, somewhere here. Equal distance all the way around. So, of course, I know it's going to happen. The first thing that pops up, boom, where's the turnover? In terms of physics, again, everything is equal. So turnover, I don't think, is what most people think it is. And again, we're going to bring this straight back to Jarman once I get through. So bear with me still. how do you create rotation from something like this that's equal and not scooping under or getting your feet in front? Because I think in general, most people, when they're thinking about this phase here at the end of the round off, they are imagining something like this, where your feet have scooped past your body so that you can then launch yourself in this direction. That's the idea. What actually plays out in any person doing a high-level tumbling pass with success, like consistently almost sticking, not wrecking their Achilles and ankles, what we're actually seeing here is their rotation doesn't change from that gold standard up there. What they do is they take the exact same path and they lower it. So now, instead of these humps ending here on the floor, these humps are actually going below the floor, like this. Like that. Weird, I know. Keep following with me, I promise. We're going to go right back to Jarman. How they do this is by lowering their lowering this rotation into the floor. So if you've ever watched a big tumbler, people love to point out Jarman's weird round off, how his hands are so wide and staggered in comparison to T hands. What they're doing is they're lowering their head into the floor. So instead of being up here, I'm going to draw this with a green square. Instead of having their head here, they learn to put their head much lower to the floor. And they can do this in any number of ways. Some people go wide hands, some people go bent hands, some people go staggered, but the effect is that if they were actually to do a nice T hand, their hands would be through the floor, if that makes sense. And then the next step, because they've lowered the circle again, now the back handspring gets crunched. So it's not this. What you're actually seeing is, if they were to do their normal back handspring, their feet would be below the floor, which is, yes, impossible. So instead, what happens in this square here is, as they're coming down to the floor, their knees bend. So instead of being through the floor, they bend their knees. It's the same exact angle as above. So these two squares here, these white squares, are exactly the same circle. All they've done is, because this circle is lowered into the floor, their knees will bend. That allows them to, I'm going to draw a green arrow here, that allows them to sink into this position. So just like you would for a spring, an uncompressed spring is nice and tall like this. So these knees up here are an uncompressed spring. When the circle's lowered into the floor, they use their knees as a compressed spring. As they sit into it, it compresses more. And then when they finally move past it, that spring is unloaded. So before we get too totally lost in this, because I could talk about this for a while, let's go back to Jarman. Sorry, I lost him. There it is. I think. Yeah, there we go. So now we can see this in action. Here's his round off. Again, Jarman's known for that wide staggered handstand. So unfortunately we have a little side diagonal angle, but what he's doing here is this wide round off. like this. So his head is lower to the floor than if he was doing T hands. In essence, his circle is, as we said below the floor. Now here's where we get to see the payoff of that. Lowered circle on the round off meets lowered circle on the back handspring. So again, boom, contacts the floor there. There are the springs we talked about. If he didn't bend his knees, his feet here would be below the floor. Instead of doing that, he gets that nice coil. We talked about the springs. As he moves, he sits into it. Those springs are compressed. And then as he continues moving back, those springs can launch. So lowered round off equals lowered back handspring. Contact there, lowered. Now he's launched that spring. Again, following the same trend, here is a lowered back handspring. Jarman does this by closing his shoulders. That's not something you would teach someone, but effectively what he's done, again, a normal back handspring would be, oh, sorry, didn't mean to zoom. A normal back handspring would be here. He has effectively done this. Head's much lower. So again, that lowered circle through the floor. And of course, we get this nice big set. So this is the part I think people get stuck on right here. Angles. Everybody talks about takeoff angles. But what's important is how this angle is created. So if we run with the idea that this circle is below the floor, his punch is actually happening down beneath the floor. That's why he's able to get this angle. That's why he's able to get so deep into this floor, because his rotational path is moving below. And that's what we talk about maximizing the springs, the floor springs. So a lot of people, what ends up happening when you're talking about creating turnover is you stay on top of the floor, so you don't get this extra little part at the end. But again, Jarman's one of those guys. Lowered round off, lowered back handspring. So he's punching actually below the floor. Look how deep he gets into that. And that's what sets up this nice, easy triple double stick. So now, sorry, the video is kind of dragging on here. Let's see what happens when we do turnover in the conventional way. Like we said, everything's equal. So gold standard, round off, backhand, spring, and then something. Advanced version, round off, backhand, spring, and then something. The traditional idea of turning over looks something like this. In. Of course, equal opposites here, so that means if you do a turned over round off like this, then the back handspring will also be the same. And if you do the back handspring the same, you end up with the same kind of landing on your big back pass. So let's fill this in. Typically what happens here when you have a kid trying to turn over a round off like this, by typically I mean the physics of it, they will scoop their round off either past, I'm gonna get stuck here. Yeah, I'm gonna get stuck here. Sorry, I drew a little bit too small. But basically, up here we have these nice verticals in the center. Turnover has verticals that are not verticals. They're this way. So if you've ever had a kid who's struggled with their head position, they keep throwing their head out, either on a set or in their back handspring or anything like that, this is probably what you're looking at from that turnover. Boom, something like this. So to zoom into this, because of course, if you're doing heavy turnover drills, you're thinking about your kids right now, saying, no, my kids don't look like that. But what happens in this square, and this is going to be, I think, the piece that makes it click. If you scoop to this, you don't get the benefit of that spring. So whereas Jarman landed something like this and sank into his seat to hit that nice vertical, and then was able to push past his seat this way, everything always moving backwards. What you get with this turnover idea is the knees, your center is not in the correct place. So your knees will do one of these, buckle forward. So instead of continuing the motion backwards and getting the benefit of the springs, your knees kind of go this way. And if you've ever seen an undercut back handspring, you know exactly what this means in terms of power out of the back handspring. It goes nowhere. The other side of this is, sorry, this doesn't have an eraser. I have to go undo everything. The other side of this is, if you've created this kind of ovular path, the landing is the same. So kids who have trouble sticking, or they can stick but it's at a low angle or it hurts, they're doing this path here. And the reason for that is that the rotation finishes exactly how they set it up. So if you finish your round off in this white square, your rotation wants to finish that exact same way. So you have two options. You can either land your passes like this, right here, which means you're gonna do a big hop or roll out or anything like that, or twist straight into the floor, or you can choose to open early. So either way, your chest wants to finish in that position, but you kind of have the option between scooping under or landing very short. So if you've got kids who can, they could do their pass but they land short, or they could do their pass and land over but they struggle to land right in the center, this is that red flag for you.